Okay, how's everyone doing? All right, I know we're getting close to lunch. We're running a few minutes over, but we'll try to be concise, and I'll try to preserve my voice a little bit. I was talking a lot in Dubai and Amsterdam and Athens. I've been sort of still on, and you're just off the road from London. Yeah. Yeah. So, excuse me. So as many of you know, I've been sort of an advocate of using blockchain in different sectors for quite a while. The number of different companies that I've helped incubate and advise. I first got into the sustainability space about 3-4 years ago. I've invested in a number of sustainable mining companies. We've got DLTX here. I'll be talking with James. Very pleased that they're now going to be moving to the NASDAQ as part of their merger with Blockchain Moon, the SPAC. Also worked with Brittany Kaiser on Griffin Mining and with a number of other sustainable miners. And then I also have been investing and advising in the general carbon credit and blockchain space and doing some research on that. And, you know, this new initiative is called Open Carbon, and it's really kind of the product of many years of looking at other models and sort of seeing where the market, which is this huge market for compliance around really saving the planet, and the need that most countries in the world under the Kyoto Protocol and now the Paris Agreement have said we have to go and reduce the global warming by 1.5% or degrees by the year 2050 and other goals for 2030. And the way that seems to be working so far in terms of getting compliance out there has been going and creating a system of carbon offsets. And so really with Open Carbon, which we did our soft launch at the UN Climate Summit in New York a couple of weeks ago. It got a really great response. We're looking to combine for the first time NFT technology so that we can go and track all the different aspects of carbon offsets with the carbon market. So David, who's my partner in this, has a background in the corporate side as well as the startup side. And so why don't you tell me a little bit about the marketplace and where you sort of see the opportunity and how it's going to evolve over the next few years?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And ironically, I just came from Chicago where I was at an event was about the future of design, but looking at a lens from a sustainability perspective and from a product perspective. And interesting thing there, everybody was talking about, well, sustainability in many ways and as part of a corporate agenda is similar to what I would say the web and the digital world has been for the last 25 years, meaning we had Web 1.0 that had this peak and it was around marketing and it crashed and burned, and then it came back up into Web 2.0 that was focused more on we'll call it social communications and social connections. We now live in we're now entering a world of Web 3.0 in which we're being liberated and being, as we just heard on several of the panels this morning, and especially the one last time where, folks can take responsibility and ownership of their data and of their information. Similar thing in the sustainability world, right? We go back 25 years to the clean tech world, where we saw clean tech as the mantle that companies were getting behind to clean up their acts in essence. And that crashed and burned about, let's say, 10 years ago, 5 to 10 years ago. And what we've seen through
It's kind of the mainframe computer era of sustainability.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, Michael. Absolutely. And what we're seeing now with ESG in the last 3 to 5 years, which has become a corporate agenda, partially that's been because companies and countries now have signed on to the Paris Agreement Accord, where they are going to be up for major fines if they don't perform. If you look at it in Europe and the UK specifically, they're much more advanced in their in getting offset credits. One, two, knowing that they have a very short timeline to comply. Specifically in the UK, you basically have by 2030 to be carbon neutral. And this is a huge deal for companies. One of the things that my investing and advising group, Structured Mischief, is working with British, the BT pension system. And putting aside what went on in the last 10 days in the UK with the ex-prime minister and how the pension markets blew up or almost blew up, they are really grappling with how do they, with the companies they're investing in that they then are getting a return back into the pension fund, are carbon neutral. And so this is the opportunity, the market space where Michael and I see an opportunity for open carbon to come and help solve that problem. I think interesting when we were in New York, we heard mixed things about, blockchain, the markets will never adopt blockchain as a way in order to authenticate and give transparency. Everything is controlled by, the brokers in London who can buy and do arbitrage on those credits and offsets. I think that's actually, we agreed, a misnomer. That's maybe a few people's perception. If anything, it's going to come and liberate the market. And that's where we see open carbon be able to create a marketplace that will actually have the NFT track provenance from the very beginning and authentication that potentially can allow a corporate purchaser potentially the use of through the NFT collateralizing these offsets and being able to have transparency into how they're applied, how they're retired, and how they're used.
I mean, my initial, kind of interest in the space was putting blockchain and carbon credits together was just this knowledge that it's a broken system. I mean, you've got this, several hundred million going to several hundred billion, and then a couple of $1 trillion of demand that is growing exponential every year as these compliance deadlines come out. And there's not a real simple system out there. There's what they call the voluntary markets and the compliance markets. The compliance markets are where governments go and set up these ornate structures that oftentimes are open maybe one day a quarter, and then you have the London brokers and the New York brokers trying to gamble on what the price is that's going to be paid by the California cap and trade or the New York cap and trade, and that's still a very small part of it. And they're basically, when you look at kind of free markets versus closed markets, the free markets always win. And the corporations are given fairly broad range about how to comply, are typically choosing to go and say, well, we want to actually go and do better than just basic compliance. We want to go and support these projects. And what we're learning is that it's not a one-size-fits-all for carbon. There are multiple different striations of what defines carbon. It's like, in fact, one of the things that we heard was one of the reasons that blockchain originally got a bad name in the carbon space was, let's call them poo coins, that were out there that were basically buying up expired carbon credits and passing them off as real carbon credits. And then you would end up seeing the prices go wildly up and down and pumped and dumped. And then you'd see the use case would be, you'd see the website of, something like Moss Coins say, oh, save the universe and save the planet. Go and for every coin you buy, we'll plant a tree. And it's just like, that's not really what the Paris Agreement's about. And there are no, kind of personal targets for the Paris Agreement. It's great that people want to go and offset their personal usage. And there's a number of corporate programs like MasterCard is doing something where as a part of them going and offsetting, they're also going and saying, we'll help you identify yours and offset it as well. And they'll buy additional carbon credits or plant additional trees. And so we're finding that kind of where corporate social good practices that are also good for the bottom line and good for the publicity value and customer loyalty are now dovetailing with the actual compliance issues on the corporate side. And that's where we really see that when you have something that can be tracked and it's not going to be pumped and dumped and it's going to be, KYC'd on both sides, and it can go in and you'll say, just like you'd go and say, I want to Bored Ape with a crown, you can go and say, yes, I want to go and buy 20,000 carbon credits, but I want them all to be not expired, after the year 2018, nothing from China, nothing with cook stoves, preferably with regenerative agriculture and solar. And you can just go on an NFT marketplace because that's what properties are for. And that's something that nobody else is doing. And we think that, we've got a real shot at growing very quickly. We've gotten great feedback from both sellers and buyers so far.
Yeah, I also want to go back to the market conditions. The market conditions have changed dramatically, I would say even post-pandemic, meaning that one, given everybody recognizes there's climate change, even I would say on climate deniers. They're coming to the place where, well, maybe we have to figure out how to accommodate these changes that are going on. Okay, so that's point one. And when you have insurance companies that are starting to say, we're no longer going to insure your property in the Outer Banks or, in parts of Puerto Rico or, Southern California, this is where people are having to say, well, we have to accommodate. One. Two, I think there's a younger generation, and this is something that, again, one of the advising projects that I've been working on is something that a group is calling a strategy group, Strategy House. I don't think it's public, so I won't go public with it yet, but they've done amazing research on what they call ESG elasticity, in which they're finding that they've been working with brands to say, if we can put out a set of really almost A/B testing, like if the brand, meaning the corporate entity, says, this is how we are either doing our offsetting or how we are committed to reversing climate change, will you pay more for that product that we're going to offer you? And interestingly, from a demographic perspective, a younger demographic is saying absolutely, because they see it as part of their future. And I think the third thing is the ESG initiative overall. We can talk about the S and the G part, but just the idea that we're going to be committed to doing something to the environment and actually making commitments either through Paris or just independently because of shareholder pressure. This is very different than it was 15 years ago with clean tech. For clean tech, it was, we're being good corporate citizens. Yes, we didn't have a one-to-one relationship with our end consumers willing to pay more for a product or service that we were offering. We thought it was a good thing because it did right things for the environment. And maybe we were actually in the business, in the sector, so we had to be. That's changed. These are, I think, those three principles that I just outlined is partially where we see the market opportunity to bring something like open carbon, which can help bring discipline to a sort of crazy carbon credit, carbon offsetting process. And, I was having a conversation at breakfast and we were talking about, well, so where do we start? Do we once the credit is posted, then we get involved? No, we want to be involved. Open Carbon wants to be involved from the very beginning, where we're actually sourcing the offset or the credit. We're able to work with those that are going to verify, be able to be part of that process around verification, not so much on the verification side, but on the provenance of where the credit comes from.
We'll work with all of the current registrars like Gold Standard and Vera. And also there's a new layer of blockchain-based ones as well that are just starting out that already will work very seamlessly with us, as well as there are now new divisions of Gold Standard, which I'm actually in talks right now with because a friend of mine from LA actually is running that. Mm-hmm. They're looking to expedite through blockchain technology how to go and get more of these things out there, but they're looking for partners then to get into the marketplace.
Right.
And really what, I called it open carbon. We brainstormed names for a long time. And really open carbon is, first of all, it's the open sea of carbon. So it is an NFT marketplace. It'll do everything an OpenSea does, but it's for enterprise. And it's also for the open standards. We're looking to go and work with the industry so that it's not going to be 15 different countries talking 15 different sets of terms. Right. And that when you're going to say a certain term, it's going to then become across the standards groups.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the open standards piece, we've got a partner involved in this Global Accelerated Ventures that are very much driving open standards. And, you have all these esteemed both universities and then, just regulatory bodies that are now getting on board with that. So I think there's a sea change that's happening in the last few years, especially in the last 2 years, I think, when people were able to sit at home and think about this during the pandemic, is now really coming to bear to make this a meaningful opportunity. Where should we go from
Great. Any questions?
Question.
Talking about carbon credits and the carbon credit actually being on chain, what are your thoughts on some of the projects that are starting to raise to proof of carbon credit, actually, almost like proof of work that it's actually there, almost like the geolocation caching. There's a couple projects like that where people get incentivized to go see, is that tree still there?
So that's along the lines of sort of going and being able to go in and follow it through the life cycle. It depends on what type of carbon credit. In some cases, all you need is the one certificate from the registrars that are typically run by nonprofits like the World Wildlife Fund and the Rockefeller Foundation. So for certain categories, you don't have to see that it's still there. It's created its carbon credit by doing one thing. If it's an ongoing one, it should, in many cases, be able to go and spin off new carbon credits as the project goes along. But we're working with all the different folks who are doing innovative things in that space. Our whole thing is just simply making sure that anything that comes and gets onboarded into our KYC has to come from a known registrar, has to have the ability. We'll start with a certificate, and you can go back and view the certificate and make sure, and you can look right in there and see in the properties that it is from one of the verified registries, and it's got all the provenance that you can see. Because the biggest problems before blockchain were double creation, double spending, and double retirement. And blockchain, in particular, NFTs, solves this.
Yeah, and building on that, I mean, did you want to respond?
Well, yeah, so one of the follow-up to that too, and I know some projects have started to do this, not a whole lot, but when they actually get a carbon credit as an NFT, they just hold them as an expiratory, but then you worry about that double spend to someone that doesn't know.
Right, we're not letting that happen. So basically, what we're doing is we're having it where the NFT will basically go and show the actual carbon credit with all of its properties in there, and then there'll be a proof of burn that'll basically show that it's been retired once. And we will do that on ours, and we'll also have the standards to let someone do it independently off, but be able to go and track that to show that it was, actually burned instead of, put into the metaverse somewhere.
Yeah, I was going to go to, an actual burn address, and, if it's a green-based NFT carbon credit, that's sort of funny that we're not burning that.
Well, you're not really physically burning something. Right. You just, yes.
Yeah. And there's one other aspect to think about here is there is the offset or the carbon credit, and then there is what actually is there out there that reverses climate change, and really it's regenerative ag and reforestation. And so that is another layer in here about how we encourage that. How do we make sure Amazon rainforests more don't get cut down, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think this is another dimension we want to add into it. The only other thing on a completely different topic is how we creating a marketplace, as Michael said, the kind of the open sea for offsets and credits. Also, potentially, can this NFT act in some form of collateral? And that's something that we're just starting to explore and looking at with, not to in any way go towards it being a security, but being able to create value in that offset, in that credit, and be able to leverage that through the NFT, which acts as that function. I mean, we also, as we all know, and we were talking about this morning, we're just at the beginning, the infancy of the impact that NFTs will have in all kinds of.
This is the potential for it being sort of an eco-currency where effectively, because carbon to date, and again, I think the SEC decides to regulate something new every 5 minutes, but at the moment, carbon is not regulated as a market, and neither are NFTs, as long as they don't do something to make themselves a security. And so, therefore, in the midst of time while you generate it until you burn it, it still has a value as an unretired carbon credit, and you can use that as a payment technology. For global remittance and for global corporate payments.
And we find that really, really appealing. I think I saw some hands over here. Yes?
Gentlemen, I have a question as it relates to actually onboarding the carbon credit. Understanding that we're looking at regenerative agriculture, so companies in the marijuana space.
That's one of the areas that would generate carbon offsets. There's also solar, there's wind, there's cook stoves. They all have different values.
My concern is about the analog transfer from the farmer. How do we avoid that that's not double loaded into two different carbon networks? So if you didn't authenticate,
That is the job of the registry, and we're only going with the top tier registries that have been around for decades in most cases, and then the new ones that have very reliable blockchain components.
So the registry process, when they get certified and they get a certificate, what we want to be able to do is help them in terms of the tracking of that. If it's a regenerative ag project, was it measured properly? Did it get captured in a complete way? And then once that is registered and it is then traded, how you ensure that once it's traded, it is either retired or partially retired, because you don't have to, retire the entire amount. Yes.
I'm curious where you see these registries shaking out in the long term. Like fairly recently, I saw there was an article talking about blockchain, carbon credits, and stuff like that. It tangentially mentioned Vera, but it seemed like Vera's take was like, oh, we're not ever going to, and have no interest in ever bringing blockchain into our process. But you also mentioned there was some blockchain-based registry startups. So where do you see all that shaking out in the long term?
Yeah.
I think it's an open market, right? So right now, the three big ones have been around so long, and they've got such, literally, there's a lot of people who are like, we won't look at anything. It's not Vera, Gold Standard, or American Carbon Registry, and they're just sort of like, nobody got fired for buying IBM. On the other hand, they are, kind of cavemen in some ways in terms of the process they have. I know that at least at Gold Standard, they are looking to upgrade their tech stack. There's at least three blockchain groups right now that are brand new in the registry business. One out of Hong Kong, one out of New Zealand that we've been speaking with, and I think the other one's out of Canada. And so those are ones that are small, but we're certainly wanting to support them, and as long as they're providing, reliable, good data from new places, we want to be able to have access to all the good, carbon offsets in the world.
I'm going to give the comparison, since I started with Web 1.0 of 1998 and digital music. And being in a meeting in Universal Music that said, obviously we had DVDs and we had tape, et cetera, but this thing iTunes, or at that time Liquid Audio, which what became, in essence iTunes, or at least that's what Steve Jobs, created iTunes based on. Liquid Audio was actually sold to Walmart, and Walmart Music Store is based on the iTunes technology. So Liquid Audio was iTunes before iTunes. They were the ones going in and saying in the late 90s the future of music and how it was going to be consumed. And everybody poo-pooed it. And that's when I look at those registers that have been around for 20 years, some that have been backed by the Rockefeller.
That was another Humber Windblad portfolio company when we both were backed by
That's exactly right. Yes. That's how Michael and I know each other. So, to me, it's the same thing. We have some luggards that are definitely have controlled the industry. They don't want the transparency because of what's inherent in them, meaning that they're going to be undercut by bringing transparency to that process for registration and verification. So look, is it going to happen overnight? No, but to Michael's point, we already have 3 startups that are pushing the limits. And with something like Open Carbon, where we're in the middle, right? We're not in that registry business. We need to leverage that, but we want to go and work with those folks and start to help them see how blockchain and Web3 will actually help aid them and make more sense than what they have from a traditional perspective.
Yeah, we're a marketplace.
Yeah.
And I think I should probably ask, we'll take one more question, and I should probably ask Sarah whether we're going to stick with lunch and move the other panels afterwards or push lunch. But
yeah, I want to get a signed book, so let's do lunch. But
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
I see some other folks saying yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm thinking.
I vote lunch. Okay,
I'm thinking we're going to do lunch. So was one last question in the back? Did I say?
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
All right, well, we'll be at
Otherwise,
lunch,
we're going to go to lunch.
and we're happy to chat at lunch about this as
We're
well.
going to do lunch. There is a book signing with Bobby Lee. Lunch is right next door, so please go feed yourselves. But make sure you caffeinate because we want you coming back here all hyper and energized because we are going to have Singularity Net and we are going to have the Miss Sophia, the robot, who has got the coolest outfit on, I swear. She has gotten a stylist and she is freaking amazing. So you don't want to move that. You don't want to lose that. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we